A waitress spoke to the Vampire King's matriarch. Her ancient tongue silenced the court. Do not look at their teeth, Thalia. Look at their hands. Hands tell you if they want to hold you or break you. The memory of my grandmother's voice was the only thing keeping my trembling knees steady. The air in the private dining hall was thin, smelling of expensive cologne, old blood, and ozone. I held the silver tray against my chest like a shield. More wine, the matriarch rasped, her voice sounding like dry leaves skittering over a tombstone. Immediately, my lady, I whispered. But as I stepped forward, the air shifted. The matriarch didn't want wine. She wanted an answer to a question no one had asked in 1,000 years. And God help me, I knew the words. The Gilded Lily was not a place for people who worried about rent. It was a cathedral of glass and mahogany, perched on the highest cliff of the city, overlooking the smog and lights of a world that didn't know it was being hunted. I was invisible here. That was the job description. Be the furniture, be the ghost, be the hand that pours, never the eyes that see. Tonight, the entire staff was on edge. The air conditioning was cranked high, yet sweat beaded on the manager's upper lip. The Winterwell court, he had hissed at us during the briefing, his face pale. If you drop a fork, don't bother coming back. If you spill a drop, leave the city. I adjusted the collar of my stiff white uniform. I was used to high rollers, politicians, tech moguls, celebrities. But the Winterwell family was different. They didn't appear in tabloids. They owned the companies that printed them. When they entered, the restaurant went silent. It wasn't a respectful quiet. It was the silence of a jungle when a predator steps onto the path. Alistair Winterwell led the procession. He was taller than the photos suggested, wearing a suit cut sharp enough to bleed on. His hair was the color of midnight, swept back from a face that was devastatingly handsome and terrifyingly bored. He moved with a liquid grace that made human movement look jerky and unrefined. Beside him walked Percival Morland, a man built like a fortress, his eyes scanning the room for threats that didn't exist. And then, there was her, Celia Stormcrest, the matriarch. She was wheeled in by a striking woman with fiery red hair, Vivian Ashwell. Celia looked frail, wrapped in layers of heavy velvet despite the warmth of the room, her skin like parchment stretched over bird bones. But her eyes were lucid, burning with a feverish, unnatural violet light. They took the center table. I was assigned to water and wine. My hands shook as I approached. Domaine de la Romane Conti, Alistair ordered, not looking at me. His voice was a low baritone that vibrated in my ribcage. And warm blood for the lady. Type O negative. Spiced with saffron. I didn't flinch. We served specialty cocktails here often. I nodded, retreating to the shadows to prepare the order. When I returned, the tension at the table was palpable. Celia was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. She was muttering, a low, rhythmic chant that sounded like nonsense. The other patrons were trying not to stare, but the vampires at the table, Alistair, Percival, Vivian, and the scholar Ambrose Hartcliffe, were frozen. She's slipping again, Vivian whispered, her voice laced with a mixture of concern and ambition. Alistair, we should take her back to the manor. The hunger is confusing her mind. Silence, Alistair commanded softly. I approached the table, balancing the tray. I placed the wine glass in front of Alistair. Then I moved to Celia. I set the goblet of warm, spiced crimson down. Celia's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was iron, shockingly cold. The goblet tipped, spilling red liquid across the pristine white tablecloth. Vala Kurnos. Estra Mori, Celia rasped, her eyes rolling back. She looked directly at me, desperate, pleading. Estra Mori. Zentos. The court went still. Ambrose Hartcliffe adjusted his glasses, looking baffled. "It's gibberish," he muttered. "The dementia of the turning." "It's not gibberish," Percival growled. "She's distressed." "Zenthos!" Celia screamed, the sound shattering a nearby water glass. She squeezed my wrist until I felt the bones grind. She was waiting for something. An answer. I didn't think. I didn't plan. The words rose up from my childhood, from the nursery rhymes my grandmother sang to me while hiding in the cellar during thunderstorms. I didn't know what they meant, only that they were the response to the call. "Zenthos Kara," I whispered, my voice cutting through the panic. "Niveros, Nimore, Solus Eterna." The silence that followed was heavier than the ocean. Celia's grip loosened instantly. Her eyes focused, the violet fire dimming to a calm lavender. She slumped back into her wheelchair, letting out a long, ragged breath, looking at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated worship. I pulled my hand back, cradling my bruised wrist. I looked up to apologize, to make an excuse, to run. I found Alistair Winterwell staring at me. The boredom was gone from his face. In its place was a look of predatory intensity, so sharp I felt it physically. Percival's hand was on the hilt of a knife concealed in his jacket. Ambrose's mouth was open. "What did you say?" Alistair asked. His voice was no longer a rumble. It was the edge of a razor. I'm sorry, sir," I stammered, backing away. "My grandmother. It was just a song. I didn't mean to." "A song!" Vivian laughed, a harsh, tinkling sound. "The human thinks High Valdris is a nursery rhyme." "High Valdris," I echoed, confused. Alistair stood up. The movement was so fast I barely saw it. Suddenly, he was in front of me, towering over my small frame. He smelled of snow and iron. He reached out, tilting my chin up with one cold finger. "That language has not been spoken on this earth for 3,000 years, Alistair said softly. The last throat capable of shaping those vowels turned to dust before Rome fell. He looked at Percival. "Clear the restaurant. Everyone leaves." "Now." "Sir?" the manager squeaked from the corner. "Everyone," Alistair repeated, his eyes never leaving mine. Except her. As the restaurant erupted into chaotic movement, with guests fleeing and staff being ushered out by Percival's terrifying glare, I stood paralyzed in the Vampire King's shadow. "Who are you?" Alistair whispered, his thumb brushing the pulse that hammered frantically in my neck. "Thalia," I breathed. "Just Thalia." "No," Alistair replied, his pupils dilating until his eyes were entirely black. "You are not just anything, Thalia. You are the anomaly." As the doors locked and the blinds were drawn, locking me in with the monsters, Celia spoke again, clear as a bell in English. "Don't hurt her, Alistair. She smells like the sun." The drive to the Winterwell estate was a blur of rain-slicked asphalt and suffocating silence. I was sandwiched in the back of a black limousine between Ambrose Hartcliffe and Vivian Ashwell. Alistair sat opposite us, watching me with that unblinking, predatory intensity. Celia had been sedated and taken in a separate vehicle with the medical staff. My wrist throbbed where Celia had grabbed me. I stared at the bruising. It looked like a fingerprint, but the skin around it was turning a faint, shimmering gold rather than purple. "Stop looking at it," Vivian snapped, crossing her legs. Her silk dress rustled like a warning. "You'll only make yourself sick." "She's frightened, Vivian. Leave her be," Ambrose said gently. He looked like a university professor. Tweed jacket, wire-rimmed glasses. But I had seen him lift the heavy oak table with one hand back at the restaurant to retrieve Celia's dropped napkin. "Miss Fairford, I assure you, we simply have questions." "Kidnapping is a strange way to ask questions," I muttered, surprising myself. Alistair's lips twitched, a almost smile. "We did not kidnap you, Thalia. We rescued you." "Rescued me from what?" "From obscurity," Alistair said darkly, "and from those who would rip your tongue out to keep the secrets it holds." The car slowed, passing through wrought-iron gates that looked like twisted thorns. Winterwell Manor was less a house and more a fortress of black stone and Gothic spires, jutting out of the coastline like a jagged tooth. Thunder rumbled overhead, sinking with the dread in my stomach. They ushered me inside. The foyer was vast, dominated by a double staircase and a chandelier that looked like frozen tears. Percival was waiting for us, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms covered in scars that looked like burn marks. "The perimeter is secure," Percival reported to Alistair. "No press, no witnesses." "Good. Take her to the library," Alistair commanded. "The dungeon would be safer," Vivian suggested, eyeing me with disdain. "The library," Alistair repeated, his tone brooking no argument. The library was a cavernous room, filled with the smell of old paper and dust. Alistair sat behind a massive desk, gesturing for me to sit in a velvet armchair. Percival stood by the door, arms crossed. "Tell me about your grandmother," Alistair began. No preamble. She died 6 years ago," I said, my voice small. "She was just a woman. She liked gardening. She hummed when she cooked." "And the language?" "She called it the Old Speak. She said it was for soothing bad dreams." Alistair stood and walked to a bookshelf, pulling out a tome bound in pale, cracked leather. He opened it and spun it around to face me. The pages were filled with sharp, angular symbols. "Read this," he ordered. I looked at the script. It looked foreign, alien. But as I stared, the shapes seemed to rearrange themselves in my mind. The headache behind my eyes throbbed, and suddenly the phonetics clicked. "The blood of the star binds the night to the earth," I read aloud, haltingly. "Only the voice of the morning can break the seal of the grave." Ambrose gasped from the corner. "Perfect pronunciation. The syntax. It's native." Alistair looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than hunger in his eyes. I saw fear. Deep, ancestral fear. "You are human," Alistair said, stating it like an accusation. "I can hear your heart. I can smell your mortality. But you speak the tongue of the first bloods, the language of the creator vampires." "I don't know what that means," I cried, standing up. "I'm a waitress. I serve pasta and wine. Please, I just want to go home." "You have no home to go to," Percival said, stepping forward. "Not anymore. If the council finds out a human speaks High Valdris, they will hunt you down. You are a loose end." "Percival is right," Alistair said, circling the desk to stand before me. "You are dangerous, Thalia. Not because of what you can do, but because of what you represent." "What do I represent?" "Hope," Alistair said, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. "Or ruin. The Matriarch believes you are the former." Suddenly, the doors banged open. A servant, pale and trembling, rushed in. "My lord, it's the Lady Celia. She's awake. She's asking for the Sun-Child." Alistair looked at me. "Come." "I'm not going anywhere with you." Alistair moved close, invading my space. He didn't touch me, but the air around him was so cold it made my breath mist. "You have 2 choices, Thalia. You can walk out that door and be dead within the hour by the hands of my enemies, or you can trust me, come to the Matriarch, and perhaps find out why your grandmother taught you the language of monsters." I looked at the door, then back at his obsidian eyes. I swallowed hard. "I'll come." As we walked through the winding corridors, the house seemed to breathe. Shadows stretched toward me. We reached a set of double doors guarded by 2 hulking vampires. They bowed to Alistair and opened the way. The room smelled of sickness and lavender. Celia lay in a massive four-poster bed. When she saw me, she tried to sit up. "Come close," she rasped. I approached slowly. Alistair stayed by my side, a silent sentinel. Celia reached out, her hand trembling. I let her take mine. Her skin was freezing, but her touch sent a strange jolt of warmth up my arm. "They think I am mad," Celia whispered to me. "But I see you. I see the line." "What line?" I asked softly. "The line of the keepers," she wheezed. Then she pulled me closer, her strength surprising me. She whispered into my ear, too low for even the vampires to hear. "Beware the one with the heart of winter. He does not know he is the lock, and you are the key." She released me and fell back against the pillows, panting. "Sing it again. The lullaby. The pain. It burns." I looked at Alistair. He nodded once. I began to hum, then sing the strange, guttural yet melodic words my grandmother had taught me. Zentos Kara. As I sang, the tension left Celia's body, the lines of pain on her face smoothed. But something else happened. The candles in the room flared, the shadows retreated, and Alistair Winterwell, the king of the night, fell to his knees, clutching his chest as if struck by an arrow. I stopped singing. What did I do? Alistair looked up, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at me with a mixture of agony and ecstasy. "You didn't just soothe her," Alistair rasped, his voice trembling. You started my heart." I stared at him. Vampires didn't have heartbeats. But as I looked at the vein in his neck, I saw it. A faint, impossible flutter. Thump, 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 thump. The silence in the Matriarch's chamber was shattered by the sound of Alistair's impossible heartbeat. It was slow, heavy, like a war drum beating deep underground. Ambrose rushed to the king's side, pulling a stethoscope from his pocket. Why he carried one, I didn't know. But in this house, absurdity seemed to be the norm. He pressed it to Alistair's chest, his eyes widening behind his spectacles. "It's rhythmic," Ambrose whispered, terrified. "Arrhythmia of the undead. This shouldn't be happening. It's biologically impossible. We are static beings. We do not change." Alistair shoved Ambrose away and stood up. He swayed, steadying himself against the bedpost. He looked at me, not as a king looks at a subject, but as a drowning man looks at air. "What are you?" he demanded, his voice raw. "I told you," I said, backing away until my back hit the cold stone wall. "I'm just Thalia." "Take her to the blue room," Alistair ordered, his breathing ragged. He was clutching his chest, his hand bunching the expensive fabric of his shirt. "Lock her in. Guard the door, Percival. No one enters. No one speaks to her. Especially not Vivian." "Alistair, you are compromised," Percival said, his voice low and dangerous. "If the court hears your heart is beating, they will think you are turning human. They will depose you. They will tear you apart." "Then they must not hear it," Alistair snarled, his fangs descending, sharp, white needles. "Take her away." Percival grabbed my arm. His grip was firm but not cruel. He marched me out of the room, down hallways lined with portraits of people who looked suspiciously like Alistair in different historical eras. The blue room was a misnomer. It was a gilded cage, silk drapes, a four-poster bed, a balcony overlooking the crashing sea. But the door had no handle on the inside, and the windows were reinforced glass. Percival shoved me in. "Wait," I said, grabbing the doorframe. Is he dying?" Percival looked at me, his stone face cracking slightly. "Kings don't die, girl. They crumble. And you seem to be the sledgehammer." He slammed the door. The lock clicked with the finality of a coffin lid. Hours passed. I paced the room. I checked the balcony, too high to jump. I checked the fireplace, too narrow to climb. I was trapped in a gothic romance novel, gone wrong. Hunger gnawed at me. Not the vampire kind, but the human kind. I hadn't eaten since my break at 4 p.m. Just as the moon reached its zenith, the lock clicked. I grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the mantelpiece and held it up. The door opened. It wasn't Percival. It was Alistair. He had changed his clothes. He wore a loose black shirt and trousers. He looked composed but pale. He carried a silver tray, ironic considering how our night started. On it was a plate of sandwiches, fruit, and a glass of water. He set the tray on the small table by the balcony doors. "Eat," he said softly. I didn't lower the candlestick. "You tried to bite me earlier, or at least you looked like you wanted to." "I always want to," he said, the honesty stark and terrifying. "That is my nature. But I will not." He walked to the balcony doors and stared out at the dark ocean. My heart has stopped again. The effect faded after an hour. I lowered the weapon slightly. "Is that good or bad?" "It is necessary," he said. "A beating heart requires oxygen. It requires blood flow. It requires life. I cannot sustain it. It was painful." He turned to face me. The moonlight washed over him, making him look like a marble statue. "Why did your grandmother teach you High Valdris?" I sat down and took a sandwich. Survival first. She said it was our history. She said her mother taught her, and her mother before that. "We were servants," she said. "Servants to the great lords." Alistair let out a bitter laugh. "Servants. Is that what history calls it? The humans who spoke High Valdris were not servants, Thalia. They were wardens." "Wardens?" "The keepers of the day," Alistair explained, moving closer. "Vampires are cursed by the sun. We burn. We turn to ash. But legend says the First Bloods created a lineage of humans, altered humans, who could bridge the gap. They could speak the magic that binds us. They could walk in the sun and carry our will." "So I'm... what? A glorified messenger?" "You are a conduit," Alistair said. "When you sang to Celia, you channeled life force. You pushed back the decay of her mind. And when you looked at me," he hesitated, "you pushed back the death in my veins." He sat in the chair opposite me. For the first time, he looked vulnerable. "Celia is the oldest of us. She holds the treaty that keeps the peace between the clans. If she dies, or if she goes mad, war breaks out. A war that will spill into your world. Humans will be cattle again." I stopped chewing. "And you need me to keep her sane." "I need you to keep us all from burning," he corrected. Suddenly, a siren wailed through the house. Red emergency lights flickered in the hallway outside. Alistair was on his feet instantly. "Stay here." "What is it?" "Intruders," he hissed. "Hunters." He rushed to the door, but before he could leave, the window exploded. Shards of glass rained down like diamonds. A figure swung in on a grappling line, a person dressed in tactical gear, face covered by a sleek black mask. They held a crossbow loaded with a bolt that glowed with ultraviolet light. The hunter aimed at Alistair. "Down!" I screamed, throwing the heavy candlestick. It spun through the air and cracked the hunter on the shoulder, ruining their aim. The bolt flew wide, embedding itself in the wall and sizzling like acid. Alistair moved. He was a blur of violence. He grabbed the hunter by the throat and slammed them against the wall. He ripped the mask off. It was a woman, human, young. "Traitor!" she spat at Alistair. Then she looked at me. "And you, the collaborator. We know who you are, Thalia Fairford. The Order knows." Alistair looked ready to snap her neck. "Don't!" I yelled. Alistair froze. He looked at me, his eyes black pools of rage. "She tried to kill me. She tried to kill you." "She called me by name," I said, stepping over the glass. How does she know my name? The hunter grinned, blood staining her teeth. Because your grandmother didn't just teach you songs, girl. She sold you out. She was one of us. A hunter. You were bred to be the bait. Alistair released the hunter, who slumped to the floor, gasping. He looked at me, betrayal warring with confusion. Is this true? He demanded. I don't know, I cried. I told you she was just a gardener. No, the hunter wheezed, laughing. She was the Grand Mistress of the Sun Order, and she sent you into the wolf's den with a bomb strapped to your chest. Not a literal bomb, sweetheart. You are the bomb. Your blood. It's not a cure. It's poison to them. Alistair looked at his hand, the one that had touched me earlier. The skin was reddening, blistering slightly. I looked at my hands. They looked normal, but the air in the room had changed. I wasn't the damsel anymore. I was the weapon, and I was trapped in a room with a king who suddenly realized that the only thing that could make his heart beat might also be the thing designed to stop it forever. The silence following the hunter's revelation was absolute, broken only by the sound of Alistair's skin sizzling where he had touched me. Poison, Alistair repeated, the word heavy with betrayal. He looked at his hand. Angry red blisters were forming on his pale fingertips. Then he looked at me, his eyes shifting from the deep obsidian of desire to the cold steel of a general assessing a threat. I didn't know, I whispered, my voice trembling. I swear, Alistair. I didn't know. Percival stormed into the room, 2 guards flanking him. He took one look at the shattered window, the unconscious hunter, and Alistair's wounded hand, and drew his weapon. She's an assassin, Percival growled, aiming his gun at my chest. I told you, the grandma was a plant. The girl is a biological weapon. Lower your weapon, Alistair commanded, though he didn't step between us this time. He stayed back, nursing his hand. If she wanted me dead, she wouldn't have thrown the candlestick. She saved me, Percival. She saved you to kill you later, Percival argued, or to get close enough to the Matriarch to finish the job. Take the hunter to the cells, Alistair ordered, his voice icy. Interrogate her. Find out how much the Order knows about Celia's condition. And take Thalia to the solarium. The solarium? Percival blinked. That's not a cell. It is the only room with sunlight-grade UV glass, Alistair said, turning his back on me. If she is of the Sun Order, let her sit in the light she loves so much, and keep away from her. Do not touch her skin. Use gloves. I was marched out, treated like radioactive material. The solarium was a glass dome at the top of the manor. It was filled with exotic plants that thrived in high UV light. It was beautiful, warm, and utterly isolating. For 2 days, I saw no one but silent servants in thick leather gloves who slid trays of food through a slot. I spent the time pacing, thinking about my grandmother. Was it true? Was her love a lie? Was I just a bullet she had been polishing for 20 years? On the 3rd night, the door opened. It wasn't a servant. It was Ambrose Hartcliffe. He wore a hazmat-style apron over his tweed suit and carried a medical kit. I need a sample, Miss Fairford, he said apologetically, to test the toxicity. I held out my arm. Does it hurt him, just being near me? Proximity seems fine, Ambrose muttered, drawing a vial of blood. The red liquid swirled in the glass, looking innocent. But direct contact with your dermis or fluids triggers a caustic reaction. It's fascinating. It's like you have holy water running through your capillaries. He hates me, doesn't he? Ambrose looked up, his glasses reflecting the moonlight. He is terrified of you. Alistair Winterwell has not feared anything for 4 centuries. You make him mortal. For a king who relies on invulnerability, That is unforgivable. He packed up his kit. However, the Matriarch is screaming for you. Her mind is fracturing. The sedatives aren't working. We are running out of time. As Ambrose left, he slipped a piece of paper into my hand. I unfolded it after the door locked. It was a note in elegant, spidery handwriting. Celia's. The poison is the cure. Ask him about the eclipse of 1812. The next evening, I was summoned. Not to a cell, but to a dressing room. Vivian Ashwell was there, looking like a flame in a silk emerald gown. She didn't look at me, but gestured to a rack of clothes. "The council has arrived," she said, her voice tight. "Rumors are spreading that Alistair is harboring a hunter. He needs to present you, not as a prisoner, and certainly not as a weapon." "Then as what?" "As a pet," Vivian sneered, finally turning to face me. "A curiosity. A rare human with a talent for ancient languages. You will be silent, you will be submissive, and you will wear gloves." She threw a pair of elbow-length white satin gloves at me. They dressed me in a gown of midnight blue, heavy and constricting. The gloves covered my skin completely. When I was ready, Percival escorted me to the grand ballroom. The room was a sea of predators. Vampires from the noble houses of the city were there, beautiful, deadly, and bored. When the herald announced, "His Majesty, Alistair Winterwell," the room went still. Alistair descended the staircase. He looked regal, untouchable. His hand was bandaged in black silk. He waited at the bottom, and Percival nudged me forward. I walked down the stairs, feeling hundreds of cold eyes on me. I reached Alistair. He didn't offer his arm. He couldn't. "This is the anomaly," a voice boomed. A massive vampire with pale, scarred skin stepped forward. Lord Varian, a rival clan leader. "She looks fragile, Alistair. I heard she breathes fire." "She breathes only what I allow," Alistair said smoothly. "She is a scholar, a translator for the Matriarch's archives." "Is she?" Varian circled me. He leaned in, sniffing. "She smells spicy, like ozone." He reached out to touch my face. Alistair stiffened, but didn't move. If he stopped Varian, it would show weakness. It would show he cared. Varian's cold finger brushed my cheek. Nothing happened. No burn. The poison required my skin to touch his, or perhaps it was intent-based. "Pretty," Varian grunted. "But useless. Why keep her?" "Because she speaks the old tongue," Vivian cut in, gliding to Alistair's side. She placed a hand on his shoulder, staking her claim. "And because she amuses us." "Prove it," Varian challenged. "Have her speak. Let us hear this high Valdris." Alistair looked at me. His eyes were guarded, but there was a flicker of something else, a plea. "Don't start a war." I took a breath. I looked at Varian, then at the gathered court. I remembered the words my grandmother used when the frost came to kill her roses. A blessing of protection. "Orenthal, Varos Kunda," I projected, my voice clear and steady. "Sectrani aham, sectrani void." The effect was instantaneous. The chandeliers dimmed, then flared with a blue light. The air pressure in the room dropped, popping ears. Every vampire in the room flinched as if struck by a physical wave of power. Varian stumbled back, clutching his head. "Enough," Alistair said, his voice cutting through the hum of magic. The room was silent, terrified. I had just accidentally demonstrated that I wasn't a pet. I was a power source. Varian looked at Alistair with new respect and deep suspicion. "You play a dangerous game, Winterwell, keeping a witch in your court." "She's under my protection," Alistair said, "and my control." Later, as the guests mingled, Alistair cornered me on the balcony. "I didn't tell you to use magic," he hissed. "I didn't know it was magic. I thought it was a poem." Everything you say in that language changes reality, Thalia. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Varian won't stop now. He'll want you, or he'll want you dead. Then let me go. I can't, Alistair said, stepping closer, stopping just inches from me. The heat radiating from my body met the cold of his. Because Celia is dying, and because when you spoke, just now, my heart beat again. I looked down at his bandaged hand. Celia sent me a note. She said to ask you about the eclipse of 1812. Alistair went completely still, the colour drained from his already pale face. She told you that? Yes. What happened in 1812, Alistair? That was the year I died, he whispered, and the year the Sun Order was founded. By my brother. The revelation that the founder of the Hunter Order, the very people trying to kill Alistair, was his own brother, hung in the air like smoke. Your brother? I asked, stunned. But vampires don't have brothers. You're turned. We were human once, Alistair said, his voice distant. In 1812, Silas and I. We were turned together on a battlefield. I embraced the night. Silas rejected it. He hated what we became. He spent a century looking for a way to destroy us. He founded the Order to cure the world of our plague. And my blood? Silas was a master alchemist. He must have found a way to weaponize a bloodline. Your grandmother, she must have been his descendant, or his disciple. Alistair turned away. Come, it is not safe here. He led me through a hidden door in the library, down a spiral staircase that went deep into the cliffside. We emerged into a cavern that opened up to the ocean, but it was filled with bioluminescent fungi and strange glowing flowers. The Midnight Garden, Alistair said. The only place on the estate where the surveillance cameras don't reach. I come here to think. It was breathtaking, a world of neon blues and greens against the dark rock. We walked along a path of crushed quartz. Why bring me here? I asked. Because upstairs you are a political pawn. Down here, you are just the woman who speaks the language of my ancestors. He sat on a stone bench and gestured for me to sit on the other end, careful to maintain distance. Is it true? I asked. Does my touch really burn you? Alistair began to unwind the black silk bandage from his hand. The skin underneath was angry, red, and blistered like a chemical burn. It is agony, he admitted. It feels like sticking my hand into a furnace. But he looked at me, his eyes searching. It is the only warmth I have felt in 300 years. I felt a lump in my throat. I don't want to hurt you. I know. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the ceiling of the cavern. Alistair sensed it a split second before it happened. Move! He shoved me off the bench, just as a massive stalactite crashed down where I had been sitting. It wasn't an accident. 3 figures dropped from the shadows. They weren't humans in tactical gear. They were vampires, dressed in the livery of House Varian. Varian sends his regards, the leader hissed, drawing a silver-plated sword. Alistair didn't have a weapon. He was still in his formal suit. He snarled, his face shifting into its monstrous combat form, eyes black, fangs extended, claws lengthening. He engaged the 3 attackers with terrifying speed. But he was hampered. He was protecting me. Every time an attacker lunged for me, Alistair threw his body in the way. One of the attackers slashed Alistair across the back with the silver blade. Alistair roared, the silver burning his flesh. He grabbed the attacker's head and twisted it off. 2 left, they coordinated, one distracting Alistair while the other rushed me. I scrambled back, grabbing a handful of loose rocks, useless against a vampire. The vampire lunged, fangs bared. Ignis Kara! I screamed, the first aggressive word I could remember. Fire of the star. A blast of golden light erupted from my palm. It hit the vampire in the chest, throwing him backward into the cavern wall with the force of a cannonball. He slumped, smoking, unconscious. Alistair finished the last assassin, tearing his throat out. He stood, panting, blood, not his own, soaking his shirt. He looked at the smoking vampire I had blasted, then at me. He stumbled. The silver wound on his back was deep, and silver was poison to them. "Alistair!" I scrambled to him. "Don't touch me!" he gasped, falling to one knee. "The silver, it weakens me. If you touch me now, your blood, it will kill me." I hovered over him, hands shaking. He was bleeding out. The silver prevented his healing. "I have to help you," I cried. "You can't," he wheezed. "Go, run back to the manor. Get Percival." "There's no time." I looked at the wound. It was black and festering. I looked at his face, pale and greying. I made a choice. I ripped the hem of my dress. I didn't touch him with my skin. I used the fabric to put pressure on the wound. "No," he groaned. "Too close." "Shut up," I said, my voice shaking. I leaned close to his ear. I didn't know a healing spell. I only knew the lullaby. I started to sing. Zenthos Kara. But this time I focused on the intent. Heal, mend, live. The golden light that had blasted the enemy flickered around my hands. It didn't burn him. It flowed into the wound. The black infection from the silver began to recede. The skin knit together, leaving a jagged silver scar but closing the fatal breach. Alistair gasped, his eyes snapping open. He grabbed my wrist, over the long satin glove. We stared at each other, breathing hard. The air between us was electric. "You didn't burn me," he whispered. "You channeled the light into me." He pulled me closer, his resistance shattering. "Your blood is poison, Thalia. But your energy, your soul, it's the only thing that can save us." He leaned in, his face inches from mine. "But Vorian knows now. He knows you have power. He won't send assassins next time. He will send an army." I looked at the dead assassins. "Let them come." Alistair looked at me, a dark, dangerous smile forming. "That's my queen." The air in Winterwell Manor had shifted. It no longer smelled of old paper and lavender. It smelled of ozone and impending violence. Following the attack in the Midnight Garden, the pretense of diplomacy was over. Alistair had declared war, and Varian had answered. Percival turned the great hall into a command centre. Maps were spread over antique tables, and monitors displayed thermal feeds of the perimeter. The estate was surrounded. Varian hadn't just brought his own clan. He had rallied the dissatisfied, the hungry, and the ambitious from every corner of the city. "They breach at dawn," Percival announced, his voice grim. "They know we are weakened. They know the Matriarch is fading." I stood by the window, watching the line of torches in the distance. "They're waiting for the sun to weaken you," I said softly. Alistair stood beside me. He had healed, thanks to my song, but he was still pale. "They are waiting for you to be exhausted," he corrected. "They fear the witch more than the king right now." "I'm not a witch. You are the only thing standing between this house and oblivion," Vivian said, sweeping into the room. She looked dishevelled, her usual icy perfection cracked by fear. "Varian has brought siege breakers, ogres of the underworld. We cannot hold the gates." "We will hold," Alistair said, his voice steel. "Percival, take the West Wing. Ambrose, secure the archives. Vivian, you are with the Matriarch." "No," Vivian argued. "The Matriarch is lost. We should trade the girl. Varian wants the Sun Child. Give her to him, and we survive." Alistair moved faster than thought. He had Vivian pinned against a pillar, his hand around her throat, not squeezing, but warning. "Suggest that again, and I will throw you to them myself." He released her. She gasped, rubbing her neck, her eyes filled with hate. She fled the room. "She will betray us," I whispered. "I know," Alistair replied. "But she is predictable. Varian is not." The attack began an hour before sunrise. It started with a sound like thunder, a battering ram against the main gates. Then came the glass shattering. The battle was chaos. Vampires moved with blurring speed, a dance of shadows and silver blades. I stayed close to Alistair, but I wasn't just a spectator. When a breach occurred in the East Hall, I sang, "Cara ethos, varin mori." A shockwave of golden light erupted from me, throwing the attackers back. But every time I used the voice, I felt a drain. My knees grew weak. My vision blurred. I was burning through my own life force. We were pushed back, room by room, until we were cornered in the Matriarch's chambers. Celia was sitting up in bed, fully awake. She looked terrifyingly young. The dementia was gone, replaced by a cold, ancient clarity. "It is time," she said, her voice cutting through the sounds of battle outside the door. "Time for what?" Alistair asked, barring the door with a heavy iron stave. "The eclipse," Celia said. She looked at me. The prophecy was never about curing the madness, Thalia. It was about ending the curse of the sun. The door buckled. A massive axe blade punched through the wood. "We have minutes," Percival shouted, holding the barricade with his inhuman strength. "Alistair," Celia commanded. "You must drink." "No," Alistair shouted, turning to her. "Her blood is poison. It will kill me." "It is poison to the dead," Celia said, her eyes blazing. "But to the king who would walk in the sun. It is the fire of rebirth. You must trust her. You must trust the bond." The door shattered. Varian stepped through, stepping over the debris. He was covered in blood, smiling a smile full of shark teeth. "The end of the line, Winterwell," Varian laughed. "Give me the girl." Alistair looked at Varian, then at me. "Do it," I whispered. I pulled off my glove. I used a shard of wood from the broken door to slice my palm. The scent of my blood hit the room. It didn't smell like copper. It smelled like summer, like wildflowers and high noon. Varian recoiled, covering his nose. "Abomination!" Alistair didn't hesitate. He grabbed my hand, his eyes locked with mine. "If I die," he whispered, "it was worth it." He drank. Alistair didn't scream. He caught fire. Literal, golden fire consumed him. He fell to the floor, convulsing. Varian roared in triumph and lunged to finish him. But before Varian could strike, the fire didn't burn Alistair to ash. It hardened into armor. The room was blinded by the light radiating from Alistair. The golden flames were not consuming his flesh. They were fusing with it. His skin, once marble pale, turned a burnished bronze. His eyes, usually black pools, ignited with the same violet fire that Celia possessed. Varian's sword shattered against Alistair's shoulder. Alistair stood up. He looked terrifying. He looked like a god of the old world. What are you?" Varian stammered, backing away, shielding his eyes from the glare. "I am the morning," Alistair said. His voice echoed, not just in the room, but in our minds. He moved. He was no longer a blur of shadow. He was a streak of light. He grabbed Varian by the throat. Where his hand touched, smoke rose. Not from poison, but from pure, concentrated solar energy. "You wanted the sun, Varian," Alistair said calmly. "Here it is." Varian screamed as he burst into ash. The remaining invaders froze. They looked at their leader, reduced to dust in seconds, and then at the glowing monarch standing over him. They dropped their weapons. They fell to their knees. But the ritual wasn't finished. Alistair turned to me. The fire was fading from his skin, settling into a dull inner glow. But he fell to his knees, gasping. "The heat," he choked out. "It's too much." "He is burning from the inside," Celia said calmly from her bed. "The human blood is warring with the vampire curse. He needs the anchor." "What do I do?" I cried, kneeling beside him. I touched his face. My hand didn't burn him anymore. It felt like touching a feverish child. "Sing," Celia commanded. "Sing the song of binding. Bind his soul to yours. Share the burden." "I don't know that song." "You do," Celia said, her body beginning to fade, turning transparent. "It is the song your grandmother hummed when she planted seeds in the winter. It is the song of endurance." I closed my eyes. I searched the memories. The melody was there. Deep, mournful, but strong. "Vestrani Sol, Vestrani Luna," I began. One of sun, one of moon. As I sang, I felt a physical pull in my chest. A golden thread of light seemed to spool out of my heart and into Alistair's. I gasped. It hurt. It felt like sharing a lung, sharing a heartbeat. Alistair's breathing steadied. The frantic heat in his skin cooled. He looked at me, his eyes clearing, returning to a deep, warm brown, a human color. "Thalia," he breathed. "I'm here," I sobbed. "The Matriarch," Percival said, his voice thick with grief. We looked at the bed. Celia Stormcrest was gone. Only a pile of velvet robes remained. She had given the last of her energy to guide the transformation. She had passed the torch. "She is at peace," Ambrose said, wiping his glasses. "She has been waiting 3,000 years to die." Silence fell over the room. The battle was over. But the war for the future had just begun. Vivienne appeared in the doorway, looking pale and terrified. She saw Varian's ash pile. She saw Alistair, glowing and alive. She saw me, holding his hand. She dropped to her knees, bowing her head to the floor. "My king. My queen." Alistair looked at her, then at the kneeling soldiers of Varian's army. He stood up, pulling me with him. "The night is over," Alistair announced. "Open the curtains." Percival hesitated. "Sir, the sun is rising." "Open them." Percival walked to the heavy velvet drapes and threw them open. The first rays of the morning sun hit the room. The vampires in the doorway hissed and covered their faces. The light hit Alistair. He didn't burn, he didn't smoke. He stood in the beam of light, closing his eyes, letting it warm his face. He squeezed my hand. He was the first daywalker, the Day King. But as the sun washed over us, I felt a wave of dizziness. My nose began to bleed. I looked at Alistair. He was strong, vibrant. I was fading. The bond worked both ways. I had given him my resistance to the sun, and he had given me his vulnerability to it. I collapsed. The last thing I saw was Alistair's face, twisted in terror, shouting my name as the sun that healed him began to drain me. I woke up in the solarium. It was night. The glass dome showed a sky full of stars. I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy, like lead. "Easy," a voice said. Alistair was sitting by the bed. He wasn't wearing his armor or his suits. He wore a simple white shirt. He looked different. Younger. Less burdened. "What happened?" I croaked. "We balanced the scales," Alistair said softly. He poured a glass of water and held it to my lips. "The ritual bound us. I can walk in the sun now because I draw from your strength. But in return, you share my shadow." Am I a vampire?" "No," Alistair said. "You are still human. But you are fragile now. The sun drains you just as it used to burn me. Not to death, but it weakens you. You belong to the twilight now, Thalia, just as I belong to the dawn." I processed this. I could never feel the warm sun on my face again without feeling exhausted. But I looked at him. I saw the man who had lived in darkness for centuries, finally able to see the colors of the world. "Are you okay?" I asked. He laughed, a sound of pure joy. I saw a butterfly today, Thalia, a real one, not a picture. I saw the ocean turn blue. I saw the green of the grass. He took my hand and kissed the palm. You gave me the world. And the court. The court is adjusting. Percival's voice came from the door. He walked in, looking tired but content. Varian's clan has sworn fealty. The news of a Daywalker king has spread globally. The council is terrified, which is good. Fear keeps them in line. And the hunters? I asked. The order has requested a parley. Percival grinned. It seems your grandmother left a contingency plan. A letter, to be opened only if a Winterwell walked in the sun. She essentially told them to stand down or face the wrath of the Sun Child. Alistair looked at me. You are the bridge, Thalia. You are the matriarch now. Not by blood, but by right. I don't want to be a matriarch. I just want... I paused. What did I want? My old life was gone. The Gilded Lily felt like a dream. What do you want? Alistair asked intensely. I want to see the Midnight Garden again. I smiled. Alistair picked me up in his arms, effortless and strong. Then we shall go. He carried me through the manor. The servants bowed, not out of fear, but out of reverence. We went down to the cave, to the glowing bioluminescence. He set me down on the quartz bench. The wound on his back was a silver scar, a reminder of the night we almost died. We have an eternity to figure this out, Alistair said. Or at least a human lifetime, which to me is more precious. And after that? I asked, touching his cheek. I will not live a day without you, Alistair promised. When your time comes, we will find a way. Or I will go with you, into the dark or into the light. Solus Eterna. Solus Eterna, I whispered back. Alone together. Eternal. As we kissed, the bioluminescent flowers around us bloomed brighter, changing color from cool blue to a warm, vibrant gold. My magic wasn't gone. It had changed. It was no longer a weapon of defense. It was a power of creation. And in the shadows of the cave, I realized that while I might be weak in the sun, in the dark, I was the light. The world did not change overnight. There were still monsters in the shadows, and there were still men who hunted them. But in the high fortress of Winterwell, a new age had begun. The King of Day and the Queen of Night ruled together, a paradox that terrified their enemies and gave hope to the lost. I was no longer just a waitress who poured wine. I was the voice that sang the sun into the veins of a monster and turned him into a man. I was Thalia Winterwell, and my story was just beginning. Like this story? If Thalia and Alistair's journey from enemies to soulmates captivated you, please like this story and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more dark romance, supernatural twists, and epic love stories that defy the laws of nature. What do you think will happen next? Let me know in the comments below.